Hi guys, today we are the third reporters for today's with you, and we're going to talk about comparison of development theories. So when we talk about development theories, it offers explanations about how we develop, why we change over time, and the kinds of influences that impact development. So with it, theory guides and help us interpret research findings as well. It provides the researcher with a blueprint or model to be used to help piece together various studies. And now let's talk about evolutionary theory.
Uy, sarap!
Finger and clover, they go together. Finger and clover, my love affair. Ano man ang status mo sa buhay, single or it's complicated, pop star o diva, lover na clover. Lahat sisimutin, sarap ay uubusin, lover ng clover, by Clover Finger.
Simot sarap kasama ang clover.
Good day everyone, I am Alger Bondes Dias and I'm going to talk about the evolutionary theory. A theory is an idea about how something in nature works that has gone through rigorous testing through observations and experiments designed to prove the idea right or wrong. When it comes to the evolution of life, various philosophers and scientists, including an 18th century English doctor named Erasmus Darwin, proposed different aspects of what later would become evolutionary theory. But evolution did not reach the status of being a scientific theory until Darwin's grandson, the more famous Charles Darwin, published his famous book on the origin of species. Darwin, and the scientific contemporary of his Alfred Russel Wallace, proposed that evolution occurs because of a phenomenon called natural selection. In the theory of natural selection, organisms produce more offspring that are able to survive in their environment. Those that are better physically equipped to survive, grow to maturity, and reproduce. Those that are lacking in such fitness, on the other hand, either not reach an age when they can reproduce or produce fewer offspring than their counterparts. Natural selection is sometimes summed up as survival of fittest because the fittest organisms, those most suited to their environment, are the ones that reproduce most successfully and are most likely to pass on their traits to the next generation. This means that if an environment changes, the traits that enhance survival in that environment will also gradually change or evolve. Natural selection was such a powerful idea in explaining the evolution of life that it became established as scientific theory. Biologists have since observed numerous examples of natural selection influencing evolution. Today, it is known to be just one of several mechanisms by which life evolves. For example, a phenomenon known as genetic drift can also cause species to evolve. In genetic drift, some organisms purely by chance produce more offspring than would be expected. Those organisms are not necessarily the fittest of their species, but their genes that get passed on the next generation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Angel May and Dagan Kalumpang, one of the reporters from the Group 3. So this afternoon, we will be talking about the Fock-Orban continuum. What is meant with Fock-Orban continuum? So Fock-Orban continuum is a concept relating to the transition from rural to urban societies. So Fock-Orban continuum is also an investigation of social, cultural, and economic characteristics of individual societies, which allows them to be positioned in different points along the evolutionary path. So, part of having a folk urban continuum, we also have a folk society. So, a folk society is an ideal type referring to the primitive agrarian societies in all historical periods. In folk society, it has assumed that it has none of the economic or socio-cultural characteristics of modern or what we call urban industrial societies. And the concept of this folk society is often criticized on the theoretical and empirical grounds, and also for its ideological bias. Folk society also has characteristics. Therefore, the characteristics of folk society is completely cohesive, morally, politically, religiously, and socially because of the small numbers and the isolated state of the people. So, who developed the concept of folk urban continuum? So, as what you've seen in the picture, it is Robert Redfield. Robert Redfield is an American anthropologist and ethnolinguist. He was born on December 4, 1897, and he is the person who then developed the folk urban continuum. Who then developed the concept of folk urban continuum rather. So, the reason why Robert Redfield developed a theory in the year 1956, which is a folk urban continuum, is to account the differences between the urban society and the folk society. Redfield does not only propose the concept of folk urban continuum, but also he characterized the the traits of the societies, which I have mentioned a while ago, the differences between the folk society and the urban societies. He said that the folk and urban societies were placed on the opposite and are very different from each other. And lastly, the distinction he made between the two societies are actually based on the dominant traits of the particular group. So that would be all about the folk urban continuum. And now let's move on to the next reporter. Thank you.
So, once again, good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, classmates. By the way, I'm Jafet Navarro Dugundug, and in continuation to our group report, let me tackle to you what is structural functionalism. So, the definition of structural functionalism, it is a sociological theory that attempts to explain why society functions the way it does by focusing on relationships between various social institutions that make up a society. Examples of structures or institutions of society include education, health, care, family, legal system, economy, and religion. So, in address to this concept, these institutions were linked together in order to create an impact in the society, most especially in our lives. These structures, in terms of their functions, contributions for the stability and persistence of these societies for nation building. And in simple words, we can see to it that about how all these structures or institutions in a society work together. It is interrelated. It played a significant role for the foundation of a specific or particular society. So, let us now tackle about what is functionalism. So, the definition of functionalism is that functionalism grew out of the writings of an English philosopher and biologist, which is Herbert Spencer, year 1820 and 1903, who saw similarities between society and the human body. So, he argued that just as the various organs of our body work together to keep the body functioning, the various parts of society also work together to keep the society functioning, which is very, very true. Shall we say that just imagine about how our organs do or play a role in our body, able to work in our body together for us to remain alive and to survive the same as the society, wherein several institutions also were linked together in order to contribute for nation building. So I could no longer imagine if there will be a missing piece or there will be malfunction. Probably can cause a lot of trouble, isn't it? Yes, of course. So the parts of the society that Spencer referred to are the social institutions. So or the patterns of beliefs and behaviors focus on meeting the social needs, such as government, education, family, healthcare, religion, and the economy. So in address to the concept, speaking of our society, all the mentioned social institutions contributes a lot when it comes to the nature and system flow in order to maintain the balance, equilibrium, and momentum of a specific country or particular country rather. So according to Emily Durkheim, he said that he believed that society is a complex of system, interrelated and interdependent parts that work together to maintain the stability, and that society is held together by shared values, languages, and symbols. So in relation to what Emily Durkheim said, that as far as I am concerned, our society is interrelated and also affected by diversity, considering that our country is an archipelagic nature. Then it is expected that there will be a lot of communities, indigenous groups, that in a way that we work all together simply because of our culture. So being in a cultural diversity country helps us to recognize and respect ways of being that are not necessarily our own. So that is why what we interact with others, we can build bridges, trust, respect, and understanding across cultures. So furthermore, Durkheim believed that individuals may make up society, but in order to study society, sociologists have to look beyond individuals to social facts, which is really very true. We all know that the fact that the origin of man, with all due respect to our religion, let us come up to tackle about any science facts. Okay, so it all started from a single species that later develops into a man, into a ape rather, into a man, family, tribe, clan, community, and then into a society. So at this point of view, what makes up the society? Of course, a man, the people. This is important in order to study social facts. Like for example, how a man able to survive in his respective environment, and also speaking of resources which is not unlimited. Okay, so the way they have to able to adapt the surrounding in order to survive. So social facts are the laws, morals, values, religious beliefs, customs, fashions, rituals, and all of the cultural rules that govern the social right. Durkheim, 1895. Each of these social facts serves as more functions within a society. So, for example, one function of society laws may be protected against violence, while another is to punish criminal behavior, while another is to preserve public safety. At this point, we're in-depth analysis. This is where we have able to construct ideas about what we call the rights and ethics. These are important in order to maintain the stability of independence, liberty, freedom, equality, peace, as well as value, love, and respect to multicultural aspects. So I'm hoping that my explanation meets our respective topic. Thank you so much for paying your attention, and let me first welcome you the next reporter. Once again, thank you so much.
Good day everyone, I am Rosani D. Pradal, and today I will be discussing about conflict theory. But first, let me discuss to you who is credited with inventing conflict theory. So, conflict theory was invented by Karl Marx. So, Karl Marx was a philosopher, an author, a social theorist, and economist. So, a philosopher who led the development of communism as a school of thought in economics. So, he was also a prominent thinker who wrote on topics related to economics, political economy, and society. He have also a two famous works, which is the Communist Manifesto, which published in year 1848, and Das Kapital, which published in year 1867. So he is also known for his revolutionary writings favoring socialism and a communist revolution. So Karl Marx, considered as one of history's most influential and controversial thinkers. So now let's proceed to what is conflict theory. So conflict theory first developed by Karl Marx. This is a theory that society is compete over limited resources. Or in other words, it is a theory where society is in a state of perpetual conflict because of competition for limited resources. So this theory holds that social order is maintained by domination and power rather than by consensus and conformity. So according to conflict theory also, those with wealth and power try to hold into it by means possible swiftly by lockdown those poor and powerless people. So basic premise of conflict theory is that individuals and groups within society will work to try to maximize their own wealth and power. So conflict theory views social and economic institutions as tool of struggle among group or classes used to maintain inequality and the dominance of the ruling classes. So conflict theory has sought to explain a wide range of social phenomena including war, revolutions, poverty, discriminations, and domestic violence. So in Marx's version of conflict theory, focus on conflict between two primary classes. So each class consists of a group of people bound by mutual interest and a certain degree of property ownership. So now let's proceed to the conflict theory assumptions. So currently, conflict theory has four primary assumptions that are very helpful for us to understand. So the first assumption is competition, second revolution, third structural inequality, and fourth is war. So let me discuss first what is competition in conflict theory. So conflict theorists believe that competition is a constant, at times an overwhelming factor in nearly every human relationship and interaction. So competition exists as a result of the scarcity of resources, including materials, resources, money resources, property, commodities, and more. Next is revolution. So given conflict, theory's assumption that conflict occurs between social classes, one outcome of this conflict is a revolutionary event. So the idea is that change in a power dynamic between groups does not happen as the result of a gradual adaptation. So in this way, changes to a power dynamic are often abrupt and large in scale rather than gradual and evolutionary. The third one is structural inequality. So this is an important assumption of conflict theory because human relationship and social structure all experience inequalities of power. So in this way, some individuals and groups inherently develop more power and reward than others. So the last assumptions of conflict theory is war. So according to the conflict theorists, tend to see war as a unifier or as a cleanser of societies. So in conflict theory, war is the result of a cumulative and growing conflict between individuals and groups and between entire societies. So in the context of war, a society becomes unified in some ways, but conflict still remains between multiple societies. So on the other hand, war may also result in the oversale end of a society. So now let us proceed proceed to what are some criticisms of conflict theory. So conflict theory first does not consider how some relationships between groups benefit both. So for example, the employees and the employers can have positive and peaceful relationships even though the employer is in the controlling position. The second example is the profession with opposite levels of pay and power can be equally useful. So for example, a waste management worker performs an important service to our society, right? But it doesn't need extensive education or training. While the gastroenterologist requires a significant amount of education and training. So conflict theory does not consider positive trends that result from social conflicts, such as humanitarianism. This means a belief in improving people's lives and reducing suffering. So to fully understand what is conflict theory about, so I will give you some examples. So the first example is inequalities in the public education system in which students have unequal opportunities for success. The second is pay inequalities between gender and races. And the third is inequalities in the criminal justice system. So in my conclusion, the sociologists used conflict theory to explain conflict and inequality between groups such as cultures, gender, races, professions, religions, and political groups. And that's all. Thank you so much for listening.
So, hi everyone. I am Anami Romano and I will be discussing about the International Dependence Revolution. So, for today's discussion, we will be discussing the streams and the approaches of the revolution. So let's start with the developing countries. So developing countries face institutional, political, and economic rigidities, both on the domestic and the international front, and are caught in a dependence and dominance relationship with rich countries. So what is the international dependency? International dependency is a global power structure in which weaker countries are economically reliant on stronger countries, allowing stronger countries to exercise significant control over the weaker countries' economic and political behavior. So let's tackle the three major streams of thoughts that can be sorted out under the international dependence revolution. We have first the neo-colonial dependence, the false paradigm model, and the dualistic development thesis. So let's tackle first the neo-colonial dependence. This is an indirect outgrowth of Marxist thinking that attributes the existence and continuance of underdevelopment between the rich and poor countries primarily to the historical evolution of a highly unequal international capitalist system. In these systems, rich countries are intentionally exploitative or unintentionally neglectful, and the international system is dominated by an equal power relationship between the center and the periphery. This makes it difficult for the poor nations to develop. The situation is perpetuated by the power groups, the landlords, entrepreneurs, military leaders, merchants, public officers, and trade union leaders. This group enjoy high incomes, social status, political power, and constitute an elite ruling class whose principal interest is to knowingly or unknowingly lies in the perpetuation of the international capitalist system of inequality for which they are rewarded. Therefore, underdevelopment is seen as an external induced phenomenon. So second is the false paradigm model. Attributes underdevelopment to faulty and inappropriate advice provided by well-meaning but often uninformed, ethnocentric international experts from developed countries or multinational donors. Also suspect are the Western-trained university teachers and bureaucrats and technocrats. It is under because of the criticism. The sets of theories emphasize the removal of the international and domestic imbalances is the most effective way to deal with the diverse social problems and accelerate the pace of economic growth through domestic and international reforms, accompanied by a judicious mixture of both public and private economic activity. Their major weaknesses are they offer little formal or informal explanation on how countries initiate and sustain development. And, more importantly, the actual economic experience of less developed countries that have pursued revolutionary campaigns of industrial nationalization and state-run production has been mostly negative. Also, according to these theories, countries pursuing policies of autarky or inwardly directed development should be doing well. Like China, and to a certain extent India, however, both these countries experienced stagnant growth unless they opened up their economies in the 1978 and 1990. So the last one is the neoclassical counter-revolution. They advocate free markets and the dismantling of public ownership, central planning by the state, and government regulation of economic activity. Underdevelopment results from poor resource allocation due to incorrect pricing policies and too much state intervention of overlay active developing country governments, thus slowing the pace of economic growth. So this challenge, it is a very challenging part of the international dependence revolution. This challenge can be divided into three component approaches. So let's tackle also the three components of the approaches under the international dependence revolution. So first approach is free market approach. The analysis argues that markets alone are efficient, as prices of goods and products and factors reflect the accurate scarcity values of goods and resources. Competition is effective, if not perfect. Technology is freely available and nearly costless to absorb. Information is also perfect and nearly costless to obtain. Under these conditions, any intervention by the government is a distortion. However, this is not really the case in the DG countries or the divergent countries. So, let's move on to the second one. The second approach is the public choice theory. Also, the new political economy approach, politicians, bureaucrats, citizens, and states act solely from a self-interested perspective using their power and authority, resulting in corruption and misallocation of resources. And the third approach is the market-friendly approach. It recognizes that there are many imperfections in the less developed countries' product and factor markets, and that governments do have a key role to play in facilitating the operation of markets through non-selective or market-friendly interventions. For example, investing in physical and social infrastructure, healthcare facilities, and educational institutions, and by providing a sustainable climate for private enterprises. So, that's all my part. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, it's me again, and now we will be talking about the neoclassical counter-revolution. So what does this all about? In the year 1980s, a neoclassical, also called the neoliberal counter-revolution in the development theory and policy, reasserted dominance over structuralist and other schools of thought in much of the world. So the political ascendancy of conservative government brought a neoclassical counter-revolution in economic theory and policy. In the developed nations, this counter-revolution favored supply-side macroeconomic policies, rational expectations theories, and the privatization of public corporations, while in the developing countries, it is called for freer markets and dismantling of public ownership, statist planning, and government regulation of economic activities. That is why that in the neoclassical counter-revolution, there is a central argument happened. Why? It is because of the underdeveloped results from poor resource allocation due to the incorrect pricing policies and too much state intervention by overly active developing nation governments. During the neoclassical counter-revolution, there is also a leading writers of the counter-revolution school. We have here Peter Thomas Bauer, second is the Deepak Lal, third Ian Malcolm David, Harry Gordon Johnson is the fourth, followed by Bell Alexander Balaza, Jagdish Natwarlal Bhagwati, and Anne Osborne Kruger. So, they are the leading writers during the counter-revolution, or sometimes called as the neoliberal development theory. So the neoliberals in the neoclassical counter-revolution argued that permitting competitive free markets to flourish is the privatizing state-owned enterprises, promoting free trade and export expansion that welcomes investors from the developed countries and eliminates the plethora of government regulations, also the price distortions that is in the factor, product, and financial markets in both economic efficiency and economic growth that is being stimulated. So in the neoclassical counter-revolution, the three-component approaches being made are the free market analysis approach, the public choice theory approach, and the market-friendly approach. So in free market analysis approach, it argues that markets alone are efficient product markets that provides the best signals for investments in new activities and labor markets that will respond to these new industries in appropriate ways. So, for more information, producers know what is best to produce in the market, and the product and also the factor prices that will reflect accurate scarcity values of goods and resources now and in the upcoming future in the free market analysis approach. Moving on to the public choice theory approach, also known as the new political economy approach, goes even further to argue that governments can do nothing right. So, why does this states that government can do nothing right? Well, this is because the public choice theory approach assumes that politicians, bureaucrats, citizens, and states act solely from a self-interested perspective, using their power and the authority of government for their own selfish ends. The last component approach of the neoclassical revolution, we have the market-friendly approach. So, in this approach, it recognizes that there are many imperfections in LDC product and factor markets, and that the governments itself do have a key role to play in facilitating the operation of market through non-selective. So, that ends the discussion about the neoclassical counter-revolution.
Now at this point, let's proceed to the new growth theory. So what is new growth theory? In economics, new growth theory is a theory that economists use to try and explain the long-run economic growth process through an endogenous force like knowledge, spillover, human capital, and information technology. The theory asserts that the actual GDP per person increases perpetually as a result of the quest people have for making profits. So anytime there's a drop in earnings in a particular area, people will continue to search for better ways to work out the problem to ensure that they maximize profits. According to New Growth Theory, new technologies and innovations do not happen by chance. Instead, it depends on the number of people seriously looking for them. Also, people have control over the knowledge capital they want to have. For example, they choose what to study and how serious they want to study. So if the profit incentive is good enough, people will go for human capital growth as they seriously look out for innovations that can help them realize this. A critical aspect of the New Growth Theory is the unlike capital and land. Economists see knowledge as an asset of growth that has no diminishing return or restrictions. According to them, it is an quality and a great resource that organizations and industry grow from the inside. The reason why most organizations invest in human capital is that they want to nurture innovation from within the organization. According to the New Growth Theory, when you avail resources and create opportunities within the organization, there is an expectation that people will be motivated to come up with new technology and concepts for the consumer market. Okay, so let's assume that a large enterprise is likely to allow a section of its staff to independently on internal projects, and there is a likelihood of these projects developing into new companies or projects. So the enterprise allows them to operate as a startup that is nurtured within the organization. So the desire for employees to invent a new technology is inspired by the possibility that will generate additional profits for the organization as well as for themselves. The New Growth Theory can be practical in the United States, where service-type companies drive commerce. For example, software or app development may happen within companies as a result of the New Growth Theory. Note that to be able to achieve knowledge-driven growth like that, you have to invest in human capital and sustain it, such as Move can ensure an environment with skilled professionals that besides fulfilling their primary jobs, they can also provide an opportunity to explore and create new service that can benefit the public. Generally, during the period of the post-Second World War, the relationship between development economics and growth economics wasn't easy. So the emergence of new growth economics has opened up the likelihood of a more productive dialogue between the sub-disciplines. Thank you very much.